Hi everyone, this is Julian. I will be facilitating this presentation. This assignment is part of my Resource Consulting Graduate Studies certification. This is a pre-recorded presentation. It will include some small activities, and while we aren't having a live discussion, which would have been great, it would be awesome if you were able to commit to some of the activities here. I do believe it will enhance the learning journey. Defining behavior, types of behavior seen in the class, in the home, in public. We will also look at some functions of behavior. Then we'll look at some tools to manage behavior, and then we'll dive into so much more. This learning experience is based on the previous survey that was done. Many of the respondents were either parents, early childhood educators, instructor therapists or behavior therapists, or some may have some working knowledge of working with children with diverse needs. Take a look and see some of the responses. So the topic was chosen based on the question that was given. Considering your students or child and the challenges seen, what would you like to learn more about? Right here we see someone saying behavioral psychology. We have someone saying gentle parenting. We have another activities and gatherings with other families and special need children. We've got how to manage certain triggers like getting aggressive or screaming or hitting. And then we also have sensory resources and behavior assessments. So based on that, I was able to take that data and come up with managing children and their behaviors. Okay. Similarly, I was able to take the data from the survey to decide how to present this learning experience. So I've done a PowerPoint, I've pre-recorded it, and had I had the respondents come in, I would be able to do a Zoom and they would have been able to follow along. As we look at the questionnaire right here, we've noticed that majority of our respondents preferred a video conferencing as a way to do a learning experience as opposed to in person, or let's say a booklet on the information. In that same token, I've taken the data from the survey again just to decide the timing of the presentation. If it had been a live presentation, I would have been able to present this around 6:30 p.m. any time of the week between Monday and Friday. So let's take a look here. I know it's a little bit blurry. Let's see the respondents and how many chose which way, what time. All right, so if you can look right here, morning times between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m., we had no respondent for that. Afternoon between 12 and 4 p.m., Monday to Friday, we have 33%. And then we've got evening times after 6 p.m. Monday to Friday. And that's where the bulk of our respondents came in and said this is their way, this is how they'd like to learn, that is the time that they would prefer. And I understand that with families, your work schedule, 6:30 would have been the best time to present this shit, would it? One of the reasons I chose to ask about learning styles is to get an understanding of how to present the information. I do believe some people learn better when this is considered. At the same time, I do think learning in many different ways can be beneficial to inputting information. I was able to add to this presentation using various learning styles from the respondent's point of view. Let's take a quick look at the data. All right, so we've got visual learners. A visual learner is someone who just like the name, likes to see the information. This may be in the form of graphs, lesson outlines, picture aids, and even like this, a PowerPoint. Then we've got a kinesthetic learner. These are the people who uses their body language, their body movements to learn. They're very hands-on, very touchy-feely, very tactile. Then we've got auditory learners, just like that. They learn by hearing. So this could be an example of having my voice over this PowerPoint, enjoying discussions, having read-alouds, so forth and so on. So these are the learning styles that was asked on the questionnaire. And we had 66.6% of the respondents who identified themselves as visual learner. Then we had kinesthetic learners who... Okay, now it's time to get into some awesome learning stuff. But before we do that, I always like to start off with a simple activity, one that helps my mind and my body to get into it. You know it, meditation. There is a link on the slide following this. Please take 5 minutes to engage. Trust me, your body, your mind, all parts of you will say thank you. When you think of behavior, where does your mind go? Does it go to actions that offend us? Does it simply go to things that people do or say? Let's take a look at this definition. This is from the College of Psychologists of Ontario. The term behavior refers to anything a person says or does. This includes skills and actions needed to talk, play, and live. Behavior can also be private. For example, thoughts and feelings. When we think of behavior is any action that's observable. We can see it. For instance, we can see a child who walks to the bathroom. Behavior is also measurable. For instance, we can see a child who walks to the bathroom, let's say 2 times during every math period. You can count, you can track any amount of times that child does that in a specific period. Also, behaviors are usually learned. Some behaviors are problem behaviors. What I mean by this is that these behaviors create a safety or health issue to the child. They may also pose risk to self and those around him. Some of these behaviors are biting, hitting, kicking, running away, pinching oneself, throwing objects, doing something like looking too much or giving too much eye contact, not enough eye contact, or even ignoring someone or pretending not to hear someone. We also have screaming using explicit languages. Whenever we take a look at behaviors of any child, there are typically four functions. These are sensory, escape, attention, or to obtain a tangible item. These are usually the four reasons, the four functions, whenever there's someone who may be crying. Whenever we observe and we've measured, we can come to realize that it's either one of these. And one way I always try to remember this is to put it in a neat little way, SEAT, S-E-A-T, for sensory, escape, attention, tangible. On the next slide, I will go ahead and explain what I mean by sensory, escape, attention, or tangible. Alright, so whenever a behavior occurs and it is sensory, it basically means that the child enjoys this activity, or it could be something that may relieve some sort of pain for them. For instance, let's consider a child who may be itchy. This child may continue to scratch that itch because it feels good and it also relieves some sort of pain. It is important to note though that some sensory functions may also be automatic. When we consider escape, a child may engage in a problem behavior. This is usually when they are being asked to do a task that they were trying to avoid or trying to postpone. For instance, let's say a child may be asked to clean up some toys before they go to the next session, and instead of picking up that toy, the child begins to cry loudly. That child Welcome back. Now that you have identified some behaviors and their function, we're going to dive into tracking behavior. We will look at how we can track behavior, different types of ways we can do that. And this is important because it helps us to find the function, and then it also helps us to find a solution. The goal is always to mitigate or minimize problem behaviors and teach or change it to more desirable behaviors. Okay, let's dive in. Now, let's take a look at observation. Observation is a great skill that all educators and parents, caregivers, and anyone who works with children should build on. And I'll be reading from the slide here. Educators need to see and record as accurately and as objectively as possible what is happening in different situations. Teachers learn most about children by studying their behavior directly, by learning to observe with objectivity, to make careful notes, and to go over to notes thoughtfully. A teacher increases his or her understanding of a child's behavior. Systematic observations made by sensitive and knowledgeable educators are more powerful than any other technique in determining a child's strengths and needs. Knowing what to observe and consistently recording the information for later reference as critical to good observation. I think that's an error. It should be is critical to good. Now, let's take a look at some of the tips on observing behavior. Like the information above, observation is best done in a natural setting. This could be the child's home, their classroom, and it's also great if the person who is close to the child is familiar with that person. Also, ensure there is a targeted behavior. Explain or define what this behavior means, how it'll be observed. It's also best to target not more than 2 behaviors at a time. Make a note of what you want the behavior to discover. On this slide here, I've added a YouTube video that shows a few natural observation technique. Now, this may be a refresher for many Reese's, so grab a pen, grab some paper, or make notes on your devices. The video should sum up event. Great! Now let's take a look at this ABC functional assessment tool. But before we do that, let's discuss some things. Remember to define the behavior as best as possible. Remember, we have to observe objectively and non-judgmentally. We also have to gather relevant information necessary to the situation. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequences. Antecedent means what comes before the behavior. And the behavior is exactly that. What did you see? What did you hear? Then we have C for consequences. What followed after? What happened after this behavior occurred? What did the teacher do? What did the teacher say? So that's your ABC. Now let's take a look at it. We've got our definition. Like I said, it's very important. All right. So I've got a little activity for you. You're going to take a minute or two to do this exercise. So basically, you're going to take a look at what goes where. So think of this. Child walks in the store and asks for a chocolate bar, but mom says no. The child begins to scream. Mom picks up the chocolate and hands it to the child so that the child can stop screaming. What is the antecedent? What is the behavior? And what is the consequence? Take a minute to figure this one out. The answer will follow this slide. All right, let's see if you've got the correct answer. So, the antecedent is the child asks for chocolate and mom says no. So that's exactly what happened before. And then the behavior is the screaming. The child began screaming because he asked for chocolate and the answer was no. And then the consequence is what was followed. Mom picks up the chocolate to give to the child. So that would be your consequence. Take a look to see if you've got that correct. If you did, you're on the right track. Here is a quick tip for attention-seeking behavior. So let's say a child engages in a problem behavior because she wants attention or the attention of her peers or sibling. Attention can usually be positive or negative. So here's what you can do. Planned ignoring. Do not give any attention. Do not engage in verbal conversation. Do not make eye contact for the behavior. Attention can include surprised facial expression, gasps, reprimands, verbal interactions to distract or soothe, as well as physical attention like hugs or being picked up. Give lots of praises and attention for the behaviors that you do want to see. And we're going to talk about reinforcements in our final slides. All right. So for example, your child jumps from the slide at the park because it usually results in you rushing over to talk to him about why he shouldn't do that. So what you want to do is teach and practice more appropriate ways for your child to get your attention. So all right, let's take a look at consequences and reinforcement. Consequences following a behavior impacts the existence of that behavior. It can either increase or decrease them. Now we're going to define what reinforcement means. When we talk about reinforcement, there's either a negative reinforcement or a positive reinforcement. And I'll be reading from the slide and then moving on to what positive reinforcement looks like. So, learning occurs when the student's response or behavior is met with either a reinforcing or a punitive consequence. This behavior consequence relationship is referred to as a contingency. Reinforcement contingencies increase or strengthen skills and behavior, whereas contingencies involving a correction procedure or withholding reinforcement decrease or weakens that behavior. What is reinforcing versus punishing can be different for every student and situation. Therefore, careful attention to the contingencies in place will help to ensure positive behavior is maximized while problem behavior is minimized. Take a minute to read that and see if you understand what that means, and then we'll move on to the next slide. All right, so let's take a minute to think about this. Let's talk about work. Why do we go to work day after day? Let's say if you weren't getting paid, would you still go? If you say yes, then consider what makes you want to go. Is it because it brings excitement to you? Well, whatever the answer is, that is what makes you keep going. That is positive reinforcement. You go to work, the owner pays you, the more you show up, the more you get paid, or the more you feel fulfilled. So, reinforcement or positive reinforcement is a reward that occurs after a behavior. So, you go to work, you get paid. You go to work, you feel happy. It is anything that motivates or encourages the child. Any environmental event that maintains or strengthens an action or a behavior. It can include praise, special activities, music. Okay, so I just wanted to note that negative reinforcement is not another way of saying punishment. Negative reinforcement is usually used to teach a target behavior to take place of a problem behavior. So let's say a child says help. Instead of screaming, he is given an item that he has been desiring, which mom was holding. Okay, think about that for a sec. Then there's negative reinforcement, which is used when positive reinforcement is no longer effective. So let's think on that again. Negative reinforcement is not punishment. It is generally used to teach a target skill to take place of a problem behavior. Okay? It's also usually used when positive reinforcement becomes ineffective. So let's think on that. Alrighty, it's activity time again. Alright, we might take a few minutes for this part. Let's say we'll dedicate 2 minutes to this section. Alright? Okay. So, grab a pen and paper or make notes on your devices, make mental notes, think about it. I'll just read some stuff and you think about it. Okay. So one example of a reinforcement example. So we've got the antecedent here. Teacher says, walk and talk quietly to the playground. The behavior is the students walk quietly but talk loudly to their friends to the playground. The consequences. The teacher says, because the class did not follow directions about walking and talking quietly to the playground, we will miss recess today. Future behavior. Students remember to walk and talk quietly to the playground in order to have access. So this removal of recess is a negative reinforcer. So think about that. All right, so here's another example. In this example, I want you to listen carefully. Think about the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. All right, so here goes. Student needs to use the bathroom. Student asks politely for the restroom pass. Student receives the restroom pass from the teacher. Okay, so what do you think is the antecedent? What do you think is the behavior? And what do you think is the consequence? And also, what do you think is the future behavior? So think about that. You may replay this to hear it again, and then take some time to think about it, and I'll also give you the answer. All right. So the antecedent is student needs to use the restroom. Okay. The behavior is student asks politely for restroom pass. The consequence is student receives the restroom pass from the. All right, everyone. So now we will be wrapping up this presentation. I do hope you've gained something from it. If you knew this stuff before, I hope it was a refresher for you. I hope it was also engaging for you. So far, we learned what a behavior is. It is any action that can be seen or heard. It is measurable and observable. One of the best ways to track behavior is to observe, and there are several techniques to do so. ABC Functional Assessment Tool is also used to observe and track data. It stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequences. Now, there are two types of consequences that we've studied, positive and negative reinforcement. Okay, so we use reinforcement to teach new skills, to increase independence, to build self-esteem, to motivate your child. That can result in quicker learning times and to reduce frustration. We receive reinforcement in many ways, whether it is a pat on the back for doing a great job at work or weight loss for sticking to your diet. The reinforcement we receive makes it more likely that we will repeat these behaviors in the future. The following slide is a video that pretty much sums up reinforcement. Let's take a look.